from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on AgDay, soybean export expectations are paired as USDA releases its latest supply-demand report. The White House moves forward with tariffs on steel and aluminum. And agribusiness planting decisions.
Because there's been such a swing in the last couple of years towards more soybeans, this might be the window to open us back up towards more corn.
And Ken Ferry shares his tips for a successful crop rotation.
AgDay, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. The March Supply-Demand Report issued by USDA is often overshadowed by its bigger brother, the March Prospective Plantings Report, which is set to be released on March 29th. Still, there were some stats worth noting in yesterday's numbers. USDA raising its forecast of domestic soybean ending stocks to 555 million bushels based on the expectation of lower exports for the 2017-18 U.S. soybean crop due to higher exports by Brazil. Now, the report showing higher demand for the U.S. corn crop. The agency lowering the 17-18 corn ending stocks to just over 2.1 billion bushels based on increased exports and ethanol production.
There were major changes, especially on the corn side of things, where they lopped 225 million bushels off domestic carryover and another 154 million bushels off global ending stocks. And those are significant changes, especially globally, because now ending stocks are projected to be down 14% year over year. So a significant change there.
USDA boosting its estimate of the Brazilian soybean crop to 113 million metric tons. Brazil's corn crop came in slightly lower to 94.5 million metric tons. The effects of drought weighing heavily on the Argentinian crop, with USDA lowering the corn crop to 36 million metric tons, down from last month's 39. The soybean estimate dropping to 47 million metric tons from last month's 54.
How much lower that Argentine soybean crop drops from where it is currently. And that will determine how much higher the soybean market could potentially go once the market's comfortable with that they have the Argentine crop losses factored in. That's probably going to put a top in the soybean market.
President Trump following through with his threat to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The president on Thursday signing the orders to tax steel imports by 25% and aluminum by 10%. But he cut short the plan to apply them across the board. The president says there will be exemptions for the NAFTA partners of Canada and Mexico indefinitely. The imports will take effect in 15 days. President Trump says there's flexibility to his plan. All countries affected by the tariffs are being invited to negotiate for exemptions if they can address the threat their exports pose to the U.S. The announcement comes amid a last-minute lobbying effort to soften the impact of tariffs. A trade pact spanning 11 countries, 13% of the world's economy, and 500 million people is now one step closer to reality. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, now renamed the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was officially signed in Chile Thursday. 11 nations, sans the U.S., agreeing to the trade pact, making it one of the globe's 3 largest trade agreements. If the U.S. had remained involved, the TPP would have covered some 40% of the world's economy. Regardless, those in attendance call the day momentous.
Progressive trade is the way forward, that fair, balanced, and principled trade is the way forward, and that putting citizens first is the way forward for the world when it comes to trade.
The CPTPP still needs approval from each country's legislature before it's fully ratified. Once implemented, the U.S. wheat industry says shipments to Japanese millers, one of its biggest customers, are likely to be cut in half simply because of the disadvantage in price. U.S. beef and pork exports are starting off the year strong after a record-breaking 2017. Now, according to the U.S. Meat Export Federation, beef export volume in January was up 9% year over year, with value surging 21%. January pork exports were steady with last year's strong volume, while export values were up 7%. Pork exports accounting for a quarter of total pork production now.
Really, you look at those mainstay markets, they're really clicking for beef. Japan, Korea, Taiwan, also pretty steady exports to Mexico, and we're having good success in some emerging markets. January was still a fairly modest total for China, but it was the highest volume we've shipped to China to date.
Shealy says beef and pork demand to Mexico and Canada is quite strong. January pork exports to Mexico increasing 1% from a year ago in volume and 4% in value. He also says that he hopes the meat industry doesn't see a reintroduction with tariffs or barriers, which would hurt the relationship with those markets. The latest drought monitor not showing much improvement in the areas currently dealing with drought and dryness. The most severe areas of drought expanding in the Southern Plains, Southwest, and Four Corners region. Currently, about half the country is dealing with some level of drought or dryness. Now, parts of the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles have now gone more than 100 days without rainfall, setting new all-time records in some places. Winter wheat fields are dry and blowing as the crops start to break dormancy. Cattle are moving off pastures early, and some hay is being fed to supplement. Dryland cotton farmers planning to increase acres now say they'll have to see if the rains return before planting.
At first, people are like, okay, well, it's over the winter. That's okay. If it starts raining in the spring, we'll be okay. Well, now as we inch closer to spring, we're starting, okay, it still hasn't rained. Will we still be okay? So as planting dates get nearer, that's going to really impact a lot of decisions that farmers are making as to what crops they might want to plant and what they might want to do. There is people that have irrigation. I've already seen some pre-watering start.
Earl Beck says pre-watering is expensive. The lack of moisture and threat of crop failure may mean some producers turn to less expensive varieties this spring. Well, Cindy's back in the studio today and joins us now with the rest of our crop comments. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning, Clinton. It's still a little soggy in Clay County, Mississippi, but Debbie Hinshaw says thankfully the sun is shining. The U.S. Drought Monitor says none of the state is currently in a drought. It's a different story back in Orrick, Missouri. Jeff Nail says plenty of anhydrous is being put on fields in his area. Unlike Mississippi, nearly 85% of Missouri is considered abnormally dry. Let's take a look at those winds as we head through the day today. The heaviest winds are going to be probably in the mid-Atlantic states, but watch over in Montana, over into parts of Wyoming. We're going to see those winds kind of on the strong side there. Picking up in the Four Corners region, we're going to see those winds in Montana, Wyoming starting to translate to the east. And as we head through Saturday, those are really going to be picking up in the Plains states. So if you had plans before spraying this weekend, you'll have to watch out for some of those stronger winds, especially in the central and northern plains. We'll have more on your forecast coming up a little bit later on in the show. But for now, here are some hometown temps.
So what will farmers be planting this season? We'll talk about that decision next in analysis, and later tips from field agronomist Ken Ferry on planting soybeans after several years of corn on corn.
Ag Day, brought to you by Resicor Corn Herbicide, a uniquely powerful formulation, extraordinary power over weeds.
In agribusiness, let's see how markets reacted to Thursday's USDA reports. For that, head to the floor to CME in Chicago.
The corn market traded higher on Thursday following a friendly report from USDA. Both old crop and new crop futures traded their highest level since early August, so a nice performance here on Thursday. The demand side of the U.S. balance sheet is looking much better. USDA told us that demand via exports and also via ethanol were improved versus their projections from last month, and that resulted in a carryout projection that was quite a bit lower than what we saw last month. So a friendly report on the U.S. side here, certainly. The live cattle market traded sharply lower here on Thursday, trading into some fresh multi-week lows. As a matter of fact, we've got a wide basis situation. The cash cattle market again traded near 126 here this week, and you've now got nearby futures a good $3 to $4 below that. So we're in a positive basis situation, which is something that we've seen before. We've seen the situation even change course from time to time, where we'll go from a positive basis very quickly to a negative basis. But for the moment here, the cash market not necessarily reflective of what's going on in the futures market, or maybe vice versa. Again, Joe Vek from CME Group here in Chicago.
Mike North with Commodity Risk Management Group, our guest today. All right, Mike, let's talk about decision-making time, and we're kind of standing there on the edge of it as we decide what are we going to put in the ground this year. A lot of talk, what's corn, what's soybeans going to do. What do you think?
Well, Ag Forum came out and said 90 million for corn, 90 million for beans. And I think that's fair after last year's season, especially with where we find ourselves. You point out that we're in decision time, and we really are.
Right.
And as we look at 10.35 on soybeans and we get all giddy about the possibilities, we have to remember at the same time we just breached $4 corn. And so now guys that are in a pretty competitive environment, good processors who have a tight bid at some point in the year, they're now looking at $4 cash, which is the number everybody wants.
Right.
So at this point in time, because there's been such a swing in the last couple of years towards more soybeans, this might be the window to open us back up towards more corn and invite some more acres back in. Let's also remember we had some pretty big prevent plant numbers.
Sure.
So we got some acres that are still looking for a home that we could ultimately pick back up into both of those crops, and that's where the soybean price might come in. So I'm convinced that we might get more of both.
More
and
of both, so like 91, 92
We
of
could be
each?
looking at 91, 92 of each.
Wow.
And that would certainly change this conversation a lot as we ride the coattails of this Argentinian weather story.
Yeah, so how long do we have before we're going to really know? I mean, obviously we've got an acreage report coming out in March. I don't think we'll know then. No. Is it going to be a May, early June decision?
Yeah, and especially if La Nina holds true and we get a little bit of a nicer planting season, I think that'll sway the conversation as well. So we really won't know until the acreage report comes out in June, but I think you'll start to get a better sense as planters start rolling in April and through May.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on it. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. We'll be back with more Ag Day here in just a minute.
Cut through the uncertainty in the markets. Give Mike a call at 608-764-0012. Ag Day, brought to you by Creden soybean seed from Bayer, designed using smart genetics with tailored varieties to fit any field condition. Ag Day weather, brought to you by Resicor corn herbicide, a uniquely powerful formulation, extraordinary power over weeds.
Welcome back to Ag Day here with Cindy Clausen looking at the drought monitor. And Cindy, we can tell which areas are getting worse. It's pretty much the ones in red there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we've been watching. Some areas improving, some areas not. And we heard that in crop comments a little earlier in the show. Parts of the central and western United States continue to see some problems out there. Let's take a look. We've seen improvement in the southeast. We've been continuing to see that over the past month or so. But the redness, all of the reds, the extreme drought continues to spread from the plain states all the way into the Four Corners region, and we are now starting to see some exceptional drought popping up right near the Oklahoma Panhandle, something we are obviously going to be continuing to watch over the next several months. All right, let's take a look at how things are shaping up for today. We've really been focusing on, well, as Clinton mentioned yesterday, the top corners, the northeast and the northwest is where we've been seeing most of the weather as the past couple of days. We'll continue to see some of that snow in the northeastern United States, and we'll have a system that's coming into the northwest. We'll see some rain and upper elevation snow as we head into the northwest and starting to head into the plains. But what we're going to notice is that we'll start to see some more active weather in the nation's midsection as we get into the next couple of days. As that low pressure system starts to enter the plain states, we're going to see a little bit of unsettled weather in parts of the Gulf Coast states. And we've got this stationary front here, so look for some kind of hit and miss showers, maybe even a little bit of snow with some cooler air in parts of the mid-Atlantic states. Heading through the day on Saturday, more of the same. That low is going to continue to move up to the north and affect especially New England. We'll see that low moving on to the south, and that's going to be bringing some rain, some showers, even some thunderstorms to the central Gulf Coast states, and some rain and some snow in parts of the plains. As far as precipitation, it's mainly, again, been the top corners of the country, but as we head into the next 24 hours, we'll start to see that expanding, especially as that low pressure system moves through the central part of the country. Now, as far as snowfall, same kind of situation. We'll continue to see that snow expanding into the northeast, especially as you get towards Maine, and then we're going to start to see some of that moving into the northern plains. All right, as far as temperatures are concerned, we do have some warmer temperatures in the south central United States, a lot of 30s and 40s continuing across the northern tier of states. Overnight lows are going to be getting down into the 20s and 30s for most of the northern tier, 50s, 60s, even some 40s down in south. And then as we head through tomorrow, boy, we really start to warm it up, especially in southern Texas, where we're starting to see some 80s, still a lot of 30s and 40s across the northern tier of states. Still have that trough that's affecting the northeastern United States. Watch as we head through the weekend and into next week as that big ridge develops in the west, and that really increases that trough in the northeast. So we're going to continue with the cool and stormy weather there. That ridge will start to translate to the east by the end of the week. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Winslow, Arizona, mostly sunny and a little breezy for you today with a high of 71 degrees. Stewartville, Minnesota, mostly sunny with a high of 31. And Dexter, Maine, look for some showers with a high of 37.
Well, it's that time of year when we change our clocks and the sun stays up longer in the evening. Now, when you go to bed this Saturday night, be sure to push your clock forward 1 hour. Your smartphone will probably change itself. If you're planning to put soybeans in the ground this season, stick around. Agronomist Ken Ferry has some tips on this week's Farm Journal College TV. And later, science and research is still making new discoveries that could change the future of farming. For several years, corn on corn was a popular choice in farm fields across the Midwest. But if you're considering a change, agronomist Ken Ferry weighs in on today's Farm Journal College TV.
This idea of switching rotations. Maybe you've been corn on corn for a lot of years and you're going to switch to beans. We want to run the numbers on that and find out what our true cost to the bottom line would be. How do we figure that?
That's a question that comes up a lot within our customer base when they're trying to make a decision as far as should I move into corn on corn or out of corn on corn into a corn bean rotation, and maybe for a lot of different reasons. It might be cost, meaning price, the price of the commodity they're selling. It might be for weed control, disease management. Could be a lot of different reasons why they would want to change that rotation. The main thing is they have to put the true cost or expenses or benefits to that rotation when they're making those calculations.
Okay, but you're saying it's not just our input costs and the cost of our seed and the price of what we're getting for that grain at the end of the year. There's a lot of other factors maybe that factor into that.
Take like this particular field here. If they would have stayed in the corn on corn rotation, for instance, most likely this corn would have got chisel plowed last fall, and then it would require 1 or 2 passes this spring to get it ready for planting. Because they're set up to no-till their beans, they can come in here and they can no-till beans into it, so that changes their tillage cost.
Okay, right, we don't have the cost of that chisel plow.
Right, it's gonna add a herbicide pass because they're gonna have to burn down this field. Now, it used to be that was a bigger cost than tillage, but today with how cheap our herbicides are for burn down, you can burn a field down and get rid of the weeds cheaper than you can do all that tillage to it itself. So again, putting the true cost into your inputs is got to be something that comes out because it's going to affect the bottom line.
All right, thanks, Ken. Science is ever changing. I'll share my thoughts coming up on this week's Farm Sense.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
I'm always amazed at the new research that floats across my desk on a nearly daily basis. This week, a new international study revealed scientists have found a way to make crops use 25% less water without compromising yield. Now, the key is altering the expression of one gene, the gene that controls the protein responsible for opening and closing the microscopic pores on the plant's leaves that let water escape. And guess what? That gene is found in all plants. Now, the study was funded in part by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and this week, Mr. Gates also making his own announcement during an Ask Me Anything interview. Gates saying, quote, GMO foods are perfectly healthy, and the technique has the possibility to reduce starvation and malnutrition when it is reviewed in the right way, adding that he doesn't stay away from non-GMO foods, but it is, quote, disappointing that people view it as better. That statement on the heels of another major research project, university teams in Italy compiling what's called a meta-analysis of studies around GMO corn, looking at data from 6 continents and thousands of fields over 2 decades. The results say GMO corn does increase crop yields by about 25% and can actually provide more health benefits than traditional corn because it decreases the amount of food contaminants like mycotoxins. Even so, it's unlikely to change many minds or impact the billions of dollars in sales of organic products. And after 40 years of debating GMOs, I think what I find most interesting is that science is still moving forward, and new innovations using things like CRISPR and others are keeping these conversations relevant and timely. Now, I would encourage you to do the research, learn what science is finding, and join the conversation. Farmers will grow what consumers demand. That's the nice thing about America. We have a choice. If we didn't, there wouldn't be any debate at all. And that's all our time here today. We're sure glad you tuned in, spent part of your morning with us. For Cindy Clausen and all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickups.